Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card for Tuesdays with Tupelo where I show you a card with the products that I received from Tupelo Designs LLC. I'm using the Happy Mail stamp set and dies, as well as this Hero Arts Double Arrows stencil, and I'm going to be using some distress inks. I'll be creating two different projects today by using the stencil in two different ways. So essentially I will ink the stencil just one time and get two impressions with it. The stencils completely cover a card base for A2 size cards, which I always find to be a good advantage. I'll be working on watercolor paper because I do want to take advantage of some of the water properties of distress inks. You can see that there's a little bit of a purple stain on my stencil. Obviously it did not come that way, it came perfect from Tupelo Designs, but I was playing around with some different techniques and I had drawn with some Inktense pencils on there which did stain the stencil. However, you'll see that it doesn't interfere with my project at all. I wanted to lay down three different colors in a sort of blended effect where I would go from a red to an orange to a yellow. Because in rainbow order they come that way, they tend to look nice as a good color flow there as well. So I'm using abandoned coral, spiced marmalade, and fossilized amber. When I started, I wondered if pushing the distress ink pad over the stencil and into the paper would work, but it didn't. I wasn't really getting a lot of coverage, so I switched over to using my mini ink blending tool. And I keep my little circle foams velcroed to the back of each pad so that they're super convenient and easy to get to. And so I just pulled those off and I just smushed the ink onto the paper, being sure to overlap. However, I was hoping to have a lot of ink left over on my stencil for my second impression. So what I did is once I finished laying down some color, I took the ink pad and pressed it into the stencil once again so that there would also be ink on the top of the stencil. There's some left from the foam pad, but not as much as when you press directly onto the paper. So I removed that first sheet, then I spritzed the stencil with the ink on it with just a fine mist of water, not too much, and that distress sprayer really gives a nice fine mist and allows the color to stay where it is but be moist and activated. And then I pressed a piece of watercolor cardstock in. To save on a little bit of mess, I used a paper towel because I knew I'd use it for cleanup anyway, but you don't need that for sure. And you see that I get a second interesting impression. The first one, where I just inked through the stencil, I did want to give it a slightly more watercolor look. So again, I took the distress sprayer and I used it on its fine mist setting just so that the water would react a small amount to the water. I didn't want it to bleed. I wanted it to still clearly have white areas, but I just didn't want those lines to be as harsh, and so this softened up the lines a little bit. The water paper will curl, and that started pooling a lot of the water in the center, so you want to be careful that you don't get too much water in any one area, and you can always heat it with the heat gun to accelerate that drying process. I wanted to try a fun, different way of creating a colored in background to stamp my animals on. So I took three colors of brown ink, frayed burlap, walnut stain, and antique linen, and I just smushed them onto some watercolor paper, and then I'm spraying them with a water bottle again. And instead of doing any blending, I want to see what would happen if I just let the water react and let it dry, and see how things would be patchy and how the colors would flow, create some dark areas, some light areas. Would it give a watercolor look? What kind of texture? And honestly, this gave a sort of a, on watercolor paper, which I'm using, a leathery sort of looking texture because of the browns and because of the thickness of that paper. And so I thought it was a really interesting area to stamp my critters on from the Happy Mail stamp set. I thought the bunnies and the bear could be brown, and so I'm going to stamp a bunch of bears and a bunch of bunnies all over this paper, and I'm going to be thinking about, and I also did the squirrels as well, and I'm thinking about where can I stamp them that will make sense, because I don't want there to be like a super dark patch by a particular area of the bunny rabbit, like, you know, it's sort of difficult to describe how I sort of place them down. But I just wanted to make sure that before I stamped it down, it was pleasing. So you see that I sort of adjust them around a little bit so that I like the way each of them look. And I don't try to fill up every little available inch of the coloring. I just want it to have a few critters to work with. And so then I placed the dies down and I held them with a little bit of washi tape. And then I am going to work on making a scene with them. I used the Distress inks to ink up a mat so that I would have something to lay these on and pull that brown color in. And then I took a Spellbinder's die to cut a little shape out of the top center. And I did it in the same place on each of the panels so that I could then switch out the insides. So these, I would take both backgrounds and combine and switch them in order to create the two cards. So the heavily colored one is going to go inside of the mostly white background, and then the mostly white one is going to go inside the heavily colored background. However, when I laid these down, I thought that they weren't quite working out. I wanted to give a little bit more of a definition between the two areas, so I decided to try to ink them up. And I started by trying to just run the ink pad along the shape there, but I found that that really wasn't giving a lot of ink, and so I just took my mini ink blending tool and just blended it out, just kind of ran it along the sides, just mushed some ink in there. It's nothing too technical. It's just giving a little bit of added interest to the sides so they don't blend as much together and it stands out a little bit more. And taping those down so it's one flat layer. So that's basically inlaid die cutting, but in a much simpler form because it's just a shape inside of a shape. And it adds some interest and allows you to show both techniques on a single card. I'm playing around with the animals, thinking which animals work better with the surfaces. I found that the squirrels were a little too small, and I thought that they kind of got lost on the card, so I'm going to save them for another project. And you see that I stamped extra bears and extra bunnies, and I like to do that sometimes because then when I need a quick card, I have some colored in animals ready to go, and I can make something a little bit faster. I'm going to stamp the sentiment in VersaFine Onyx Black ink because I want to make sure that you can see it really clearly, even though it's going to be stamped on a pretty busy background. And right here it actually looks like that's kind of getting lost. A suggestion would be to clear emboss it, because if you stamped it in black and clear embossed it, that would give it a little bit more heaviness and presence. And it might not feel like it's getting as lost on the paper, but if you feel like your sentiment isn't prominent enough, then maybe you'd also want to add a banner by stamping it on some other cardstock as well. But once everything dries, the sentiments are quite readable, so I wasn't too concerned. And then I just wanted to add a little bit of embellishment, so I have these puffy heart stickers, and I'm adding them in black because I don't want to add any more color to this project. I really want the interesting backgrounds and textures formed by the Distress ink to be the star of the show. So that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials featuring stencils, Distress ink, Copic marker blending, then you can subscribe to my channel. I will leave you links to the Tupelo Designs LLC store where I was able to pick up all of these products, and you can too. Thanks for watching. Bye.